We will now move to the first session. So I invite Dr. Barun Deb Pal and Mr. Zaeem-Al Ehsan. I know that Syeda should be joining online. Where is Zaeem? Zaeem, are you? Yeah, sure. So is Syeda online?
The one virtual, yeah.
She's Thank you, Hans. I think it was very stimulating. I'm quite sure that this talk and as well as some of the points you mentioned will be discussed throughout the day in many various papers. And I again thank you for a very exciting presentation. So we'll start with our first technical session on macroeconomic challenges. And we have three papers here. First, Dr. Barun Deb Pal. Since you have the agenda, I'm really going to read out the paper or the title of the paper. So, Barun, yes, please, floor is yours.
Thank you.
I can see that online there are around 100 participants are there from various parts of the world. They have joined. And if there is any question from there, please post the question in the chat box and we'll see if the time permits. We'll pass this question to the presenters. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, SANEM and World Bank, for giving us this opportunity to present our paper. So three of us, me, Dr. Sanjib Pohit and Dr. Meenakshi Rajeev, we worked on this paper. We started working on this paper during the time when Indian economy was shocked under the COVID pandemic in 2020 onwards. So without describing much about the background, because most of us already have gone through that phase and we know how disaster that pandemic was. But I would like to focus more on the economic side of the pandemic that we worked on. So the motivation that for this particular work started from the announcement that India government made during the early stage of COVID. That was a quite huge package that government of India announced. It's in terms of Indian rupees, it was 20 trillion rupees, which is close to 300 billion. And in macroeconomic term, if you split them two into fiscal and monetary term, it is around 8 trillion is in terms of monetary policy, almost that is 40%, and 60% is your fiscal policy measures. And if you then further classify the entire fiscal measures across different activities, so we saw that agriculture received the most, or the allocation was most, or the focus was most on the agriculture sector, followed by the household transfer in terms of income transfer, or also the transfer of the food, and then other services and sectors. In spite of all this big initiative that government took in 2020 May, we saw there is a severe decline in the GDP at the end of the fiscal year 2021. So that is, there was a GDP fall was around 6%, and almost all the pillars of GDP fell down to in many extent. So the debate came from there when we realized that there was a huge amount of government initiative, but in spite of that, there was a shock. So experts says that though the government claimed that it was around 10% of the GDP, that relief package, but experts says that in terms of cash money, it is only 1%. And also some experts, they recommended or suggested the government to make more money or to print money even to give it to the poor people as an income support so that they can revive from the short-run phase. And our national think tank, National Council of Applied Economics, they did some projection. They said that they need more support to revive the economy during that crisis. So the question we asked among ourselves, and the question came from this kind of phenomena, is that whether this package helped Indian economy revive or help the economy during that crisis that we faced. And if it was not sufficient, then what alternative we could suggest? So these are the two basic questions that we started with to analyze this work. So our objective first is to develop a model where we can analyze this alternative phenomena. So we need a counterfactual analysis that whether this, how much potential impact that COVID could have done and how much impact we could have saved due to this kind of a policy package or relief packages. And then what are the alternatives and how that will help Indian economy to revive.
Closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Because the online participants may not.
Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. So now I'll spend quite a bit time on the approach and methodology that we argued quite a lot of time past a couple of years as well. When there was a shutdown completely around 66 days in April and May, then most of the non-essential activities was completely shut. So if we think from the accounting perspective, you have no production, no market, nothing is there. But being an economist, when we think from the economic perspective, there is a difference between accounting and a behavioral perspective. Why a producer will shut down its production? Because accounting sense is different and behavior is different. And when we do the model, we need to account the behavior. Then only we can see that how different packages responses to the economic system. So then we started thinking that we thought in another way that why producer will stop that production. So there is some issues that is causing them not to produce, stop the production, and then wait for situation to normalize or let market take its own corrections. So we thought of an idea that there must be a huge transaction cost to operate the production. That's why producers they stop the production. There is administrative policies that you cannot open your shop, you cannot produce the non-essential commodities. That means you cannot bring even labor to your production place, or you have to pay extra cost to the labor or extra arrangements so that labor can come to your farm and can work, which is not feasible for you, so you shut down the production. That was one channel of the impact of COVID-19. Since our model is an annual model, so this was a phase around 25% of the time was completely shut down. Then during unlockdown period, then every state took their own measures. There was a containment measure. Every state has their own policy to open up. There are some activities were shut down for almost 6 months, like airlines was, for civil passengers, domestic passengers, even the movie theater, shopping mall were closed for quite a longer period. So there was a quite diverse kind of a policy for different activities. So then it started growing up. So that there was another channel through which economy got impacted. On the other hand, household side, their mobility also get down. So all the tourist and tourist and travel services demand by the household, that also fell down. And it was sometimes not due to the income fell down. It was the force or the kind of a situation happened that due to fear they could not come out, they did not go or they did not take the public transport. So that there was another behavioral side from the demand side that impacted the Indian economy. So that is how we divided the entire channel of COVID into two sides, on the production and demand side. And when we develop a CG model, we use the nested production function, and on the top it is the composite supply, and on the bottom is the production function. And so on the bottom side, when we have a domestic production function, we introduce this transaction cost theory so that this cost is so huge that you have to stop your production or you have to cut down your production. So that is how your economic shock will start. And then there was also some kind of a logistic challenges that it also causes this distribution issues, and that increases the prices of the commodity. So if we look from the economic perspective, so look at this basic production economics theory. So the point E, is your producer's equilibrium under normal situation. When you are optimizing your production or you are optimizing your profit, so you are demanding certain amount of labor and capital corresponding to this phenomenon. Now, what happened when there is a shock? So when there is a shock, that means you are paying extra cost for your labor, extra cost for your capital. That means the amount of the horizontal intersect OA will become shorter, because your labor and capital become costly. So you're given the producer's budget, you cannot produce the initial amount or initial equilibrium level that is corresponding to E naught. So your equilibrium level will fall down from E naught to the level called E1, that is we are giving in this figure. So this is how we have conceptualized the shock into the COVID-19 shock through the behavioral model called Computable General Equilibrium model. So So that means that there is the shock from E0 to E1 is basically you fell down, and now you have to revive your economy from E1 to E0. So this is where we need the strategy. So whatever government initiated, whatever policy government has taken, we have given the shock there and tried to see whether economy revived there and how effective that was. So we have used Social Accounting Matrix of 2017-18, which was latest available and published by IFPRI to solve the CG model. And there are quite a wide range of scenario we have developed. First, we have seen what is the shock, how much impact we have. Then we have introduced the package. Then we have changed some of the, within the package, we have changed some of the component, like, giving more money to the household, giving direct cash transfer to the producer to, encourage them to produce, and also to, exempt some amount of taxes so that we can have the better impact. So if we see the impact, the first scenario, when there was no kind of a policy, we saw that almost 9% GDP fell down. That means if you did not have any kind of a package, your economy could have fallen down by 9%. But due to some of the package, some relief packages, that helped economy to reduce some amount of losses, not the entire amount. So finally we reached around 6%. But the other cases where we are giving money to the household as an income support, that even did not work much at that point, because your production is stopped, your supply is not making, so supply is constant there. So even if you have money, there is no market to produce. So finally we saw that when we are giving, encouragement or the incentive to the producer, we are seeing that quite a positive impact on the side of the producer. So I'll skip this and I'll just focus. This is my last slide of this discussion. Just to what the argument I started is that there was a huge amount of announcement of 10% GDP as an incentive. But when we really looked at, we saw that with the package, the fiscal deficit shifted from minus 3.1% to minus 4.1%. So if there was a COVID, no incentive, so your fiscal deficit would have been minus 3%. But when you have announced 10% of GDP as a fiscal or government initiative, your fiscal deficit came around minus 4%. Why it happened? Because the economy was a supply constant economy. Producers did not have a confidence to produce, and most of the policies was linked with your credit. If you take credit, you will get some subsidy. So unless you are encouraged to produce, there is no demand for credit. So there is a huge amount of incentive that government announced in terms of credit subsidy that was not utilized. So that is how we saw that though there is a huge amount of support that government has taken up, but that was not being utilized because of the kind of a situation was there that time. Okay, so the bottom line message is that the situation that we faced was the production side, supply side, constant economy. Though there was a challenge, demand side challenges Indian economy faced before COVID also. But if we just prioritize between them, so it is more of a supply side rather than the demand side. So you need to think of the incentivizing producer rather than the demand household to revive the economy. Then the mechanism that we are suggesting them, that government of India announced a digital portal for informal worker to channelizing the benefits to them. So if we can just link the producers, incentivize wage subsidy or something like to encourage more employment, more production, like production linked subsidy, then it will help. So with that, I stop my presentation and we'll happy to receive your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Barun. Very interesting presentation. So we have a few minutes for any questions to Barun, if anyone wants to take the lead. I have a question, especially when you talked about providing support to the producers. We also saw in Bangladesh that the producers are not uniform because there are diversity, heterogeneity of the producers, small producers, large producers. And we found that the large producers in Bangladesh, they gained quite a lot from the government support, whereas the small and medium enterprises, they were not really getting the right kind of support. So what was, how was the Indian experience, and how would you have, whether you have been able to model that?
Actually, see, in our model, we really did not have that kind of a specification of the, kind of formal producer and informal producer. What we, thought of is that the production linked kind of a subsidy. We thought of like production linked subsidy or incentive in terms of cash, not in terms of like virtual money or something like that. So it was like that most of the non-essential commodities like textiles or some of the services sector where there was a impact was very huge. So we just, give it, introduce a parameter in terms of a additional benefit. As much as you put, if you produce more, you will get more. So that was the kind of a technical issue that we have used to solve the model.
Yeah. Yes. First here. Yeah. Only 2 questions I can take. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, you're talking about increasing production.
Yes.
Right. But if everything is shut down because of the COVID, how that will help?
Yeah. Actually, see. The model was annual model. Shutdown was for a short period, and then rest of the period was quite open up. But so our model took up the issue of the 365 days, where we have introduced 25% times for say there was a no. But what we realized is that shutdown was there. That time we did not have any experience about COVID. After that, people voluntarily were at home. They were not coming out because of the fear and other things. And producers also did not get the confidence to produce more. So that kind of a situation was there. Okay. So if you then incentivize them, then what? But obviously you need other support like your health and other support to be there. Obviously, that we are not denying the fact. So that your infrastructure should be that people should come out, they can do their economic activity, and the health fear can be minimized by better infrastructure. That is obviously there. Okay.
So Abu Yusuf, and then I will take one question from the Webex as well, please.
So thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. So it's true that the stimulus package given by the Indian government was helpful, but most of the package was loan-based, credit-based, and there are working capital and also term loan. So the big companies, basically big factories, big enterprises, they have been benefited, and the same case in case of Bangladesh. So I think those who are, what was the impact on the SME, small, medium enterprises, rather big factories, they have been benefited enormously with this package. And another question is, despite this initiative, Indian the GDP growth rate was so far, I remember, -9%. So why it was happened despite this initiative? Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a thing. The first question you said about the SMEs. So when we unfolded the government policies, we have taken care of the SMEs because it was most largely on SMEs. Okay, so we have not given anything on the heavy industry like power and others. Then the question you said that in spite of, so if you see even actual data, there is a 6% fall in GDP, and when we have done the analysis without incentive, it is -9%. So the minimum, reduction, because there was some income incentive also there. Agriculture also was given a huge amount of support in terms of procurement. So all those played another role to revive the economy.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one question. I can take one question from the chat box. Dr. Shomesh Mathur, he asked a question, probably it is more of a technical question. Did the land and natural resource gain in terms of real return during COVID?
No, actually, we have not explicitly analyzed that part, but I take your comment very seriously and we'll look at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Barun. So thank you so much. We can now move to the second presentation, which is by Syeda ShahBano Ijaz. She was supposed to be here, very unfortunately, at the last moment. Something actually caught her, and that's why she could not attend, and she is joining through Webex. So ShahBano, I'm hopeful that you are here with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
You can hear us?
Raihan. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you. ShahBano, thank you so much. Kindly finish your presentation in 10-12 minutes, okay?
Absolutely. I'll put a timer on. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you to Professor Raihan for arranging this and for coordinating and making sure that I was able to attend, even though I couldn't actually make it in person. So this is we're going to make a little bit of a segue from economic effects into effects on political behavior. I'll look at foreign aid and political participation in Pakistan, and the kind of foreign aid that I'm actually exploring in my work is what would help countries in South Asia come up with the kind of stimulus programs that were being talked about in the previous presentation. In Pakistan, for example, there was an income support program that was launched during COVID, again, with help from foreign aid. So I want to look at how political agents in these countries react to foreign aid. So the main question that I'm asking is, can foreign aid improve political participation and accountability in recipient states, because generally we would think that foreign aid is a form of unearned income and will actually hurt accountability. However, what I'm arguing is that the last mile of aid delivery, which is really, a lot of what was being talked about in the previous presentation about how foreign aid actually gets to the intended beneficiary, how is it being advertised, or is it a digital form of payment, etc., that is interrupted by bureaucratic and informational hurdles. And I could sense that because we were talking about, well, there should be some form of digital information or digitized form of payment, but those actually create bureaucratic and informational hurdles for populations in countries like South Asia. In order to overcome those hurdles, voters demand last mile facilitation from their elected representatives. So they will ask their elected representatives to help them get registered for the program or to get access to the program. And I argue that in response, politicians supply last mile services that are locally non-excludable. So once they choose to supply this service to a particular constituency, they're not able to then select on which constituents in that particular area are able to benefit from that service or not, which in turn recreates a fiscal contract with the potential to improve democratic accountability. So we have once again this exchange, this political exchange taking place where voters are demanding explicitly a service, a last mile service of their representatives, which is being provided to them in response to demand, not necessarily in response for their past electoral support. So the way that I study this is by using a natural experiment. I study an income support program in Pakistan for which inclusion is based on a poverty score. I do a survey of households that are distributed very close to the discontinuity, and I try to tease out differences in outcomes based on whether or not a household is eligible for that particular program. Briefly, I want to talk about what last mile services are. These are any publicly provided services that help citizens obtain the benefits that they're entitled to receive. So for any program, any public program, you have a budgetary outlay, program is established, and there are some eligibility criteria. And the movement between the eligibility criteria and actually obtaining the benefit is what I term as last mile service delivery. So as an example, there might be a school that has been established to help out female primary education in an area, but unless the girl is actually sitting in the classroom, the benefits are not being obtained. So it's the movement from the creation of the school that makes certain girls in that area eligible for education to the girl actually being situated in the classroom that is characterized by last mile. In developing countries like Pakistan, some of the issues that come up with last mile, the hurdles that I was talking about, are if biometric verification is needed, women who are washing dishes and clothes all day long might not be able to get biometric verification done easily because of blurred fingerprints. And then there is a physical transportation problem. People are not able to access certain cash points because they're simply not able to travel to them. This became a huge concern, particularly during COVID. Why would eligibility lead to the kind of demand for last mile services that I'm talking about? Theoretically, I argue that foreign aid creates a public program, but then the mechanisms that come into play are that potential beneficiaries experience a sense of ownership. They experience barriers to access when they try to obtain this money that they know is intended for them. But they also know that program quality is high. So they know that once they get into this program, partly because it has been supported by donors, it will allow them to obtain certain benefits. And these are the mechanisms that motivate them to ask for last mile services from their representatives. If the politicians respond or how the politicians respond with regards to these last mile services allows voters to assess their quality, so they know whether this politician will deliver or not. It also increases their level of political knowledge. And I argue that overall, then it increases political participation more broadly. My theory lends itself to several hypotheses. I just want in today's presentation to focus on the two at the bottom. The first one is that eligibility for foreign aid increases demands for last mile service delivery. And the second is that eligibility for foreign aid actually leads to the ability to evaluate politicians' quality. Again, these are, I'm going to go over them very quickly. These are the key hypotheses. Voters from households eligible for foreign aid are more likely to demand last mile service delivery. And voters from households eligible for foreign aid are more likely to be able to evaluate their local politicians. Briefly, the natural experiment that I'm looking at is in the context of the Benazir Income Support Program, which was established in response to an IMF conditionality. It's the largest social safety net in Pakistan. It's targeted towards women. However, the fiscal flow and the eligibility is determined at the household level using a poverty scorecard, which is collected at a point in time. And so it has a clear eligibility criteria that is difficult to manipulate. And the payments for this particular program equal about $9 per month in a country where the poverty line, at least as of December, was around $13 per month. So this is the distribution of poverty, of the poverty score in Pakistan. The eligibility threshold is a poverty score of 32. As you can see, this is a program that is in theory targeting a large number of households. All right, so the way that I measure last mile service in the survey fielded to these households is by asking them what kind of public goods do they prefer. We can talk more about in the Q&A about why I pose this as a choice. I asked them if you would want a last mile service good, such as public transportation versus local law and order, or an ID card camp versus a vaccination camp. And then I asked them to rank 5 public goods in order, including 2 goods that are last mile service delivery goods, document verification, and the presence of a cell phone signal tower, versus 3 more conventional goods that you would be familiar with in this context are in high demand: public toilets, grocery rations, and free food. I use a fuzzy regression discontinuity design. I'm just going to go over this so we can get to the results. Okay, so what I find is that it is indeed the case that households that are eligible for foreign aid are more likely to demand public transportation versus asking for local law and order. They're also more likely to ask for ID card camps that help them get enrolled into these public programs compared to vaccination camps. Again, in terms of ranking the different public goods, I find that they're more likely to rank document verification camps higher, and they're less likely to ask for free food distribution. This could be a wealth effect, so they're getting richer because of this income transfer, and so they are less likely to ask for free food. But I suspect that this is more a reversal in preferences from asking for conventional public goods to asking for last mile service delivery goods. In terms of the second hypothesis, can they evaluate their politicians? So this is a yes or no answer, just saying, can you rate your local councillor in terms of capacity, approachability, and honestly, yes or no? I find that voters from households that are eligible for foreign aid, and the mechanism at play here is that because they're able to ask for services, get them in return, are more likely to say that they are able to evaluate their politicians along these dimensions. Also, those who claim that they are actually receiving these services, so those in high receipt of last mile service delivery households and amongst the households that are eligible, are more likely to rank their politicians higher in terms of capacity and approachability. So they think their local councillor is more has more capacity to serve them, is also more approachable. I do not find any movement on honesty, however. Being in a household that's eligible for foreign aid does not have any effect on future turnout. But again, because I'm speaking to an audience that's familiar with South Asia, we know that there's already a very high willingness to vote amongst this population. And in my sample, I found that more than 80% of respondents claim they will turn out to vote in future elections. We should therefore be thinking more about non-electoral forms of participation. And I do find that those who are eligible rank their politicians higher if they receive the services. They're also more likely to know the names of their representatives. In terms of the mechanisms, does ownership matter? So knowing that this aid belongs to you, does that make it more likely for you to ask for last mile service delivery? I find that in terms of ranking the goods, they're more likely to rank document verification higher and more likely to rank grocery rations and free food distribution lower. I find the same for program quality. Those who think that this is a good program, it is going to bring them benefits, are more likely to ask for document verification, less likely to ask for free food. What are the takeaways of this presentation? First of all, I'm centering voters' agency. So I want us to think about how foreign aid, if it is not going away in a post-COVID world, can actually improve political participation, and that the voters in these countries do have agency to ask for goods that are being funded through foreign aid. There is a recreation of the citizen-state contract at the local level. And I make a case for non-discretionary programs. So if we have these kind of programs that use a clear eligibility criteria, they may create bureaucratic hurdles, but at the same time, the positive side of this is that they allow or they create a space for these voters to ask for things and lay claims on the state. And I do think that foreign aid matters in this case because it has a reputational spillover. A lot of these programs are evaluated, which makes people feel that they have good quality. And I will stop here because my 10 minutes are over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ShahBano. Thank you so much. A very, very interesting presentation. Any question from the audience? Yes, so I can see the hand from behind. So if you can kindly introduce yourself very briefly and then pose the question.
Hi, ShahBano. I'm Maham from American University, also a PhD student. So my question would be, so with regards to document verification that you pointed out was seen more in households that qualify for the foreign aid programs such as BISP, but I was thinking that maybe this is because as you get poorer, your ability to get these governmental tasks done gets lower, right? So a lot of these document verification and all of these systems they have so much bureaucratic processes involved in them that it really depends upon how much social capital you have in as an individual. So those with like higher incomes would have more contacts, which allows it to become easier for you to get these things documented and getting them verified, right? So maybe that's one aspect that you could look at as well in your analysis.
No, absolutely. I thank you for the question. And I think that's exactly the case that I'm trying to make, which is that in a context where people are not able to do these things because of low information and low literacy, they're still able to fix the problem that is created, which is, they need document verification done. I term this as a problem carefully. It is a step in being able to access the program. But local populations are able to fix this issue by actually seeking help from their local politicians. The broader picture that I'm trying to paint here is that you cannot take politics out of the delivery of foreign aid. So a lot of donors try to depoliticize foreign aid because of issues of corruption, but at the local level, and more in my broader dissertation, I look at how politicians are also responding in a very in what is a heartening way, which is that those who are asking them for these kind of services, they're providing them. So it's really about reintroducing politics and showing that voters have the agency, recipients have the agency to ask for these services. Thank you.
Thank you, ShahBano. Mugdha Mazhab, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Use the microphone kindly, please.
ShahBano, can you hear me?
Absolutely, I can, and I wish I was there in person.
It's so good to see you,
Yes,
Joanne.
absolutely.
Great presentation.
Likewise.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Number one, maybe a bit technical. So because you were running...
Just want to say, we need to be brief. The question is brief, the answer also.
Absolutely. So the first one is fuzzy RD design, right? So I really wanted to see if there was a discontinuous jump in your main variables, because the way the coefficients were presented was a bit different. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that. And the second one is a broad question about just because it's so good to see that you're adding on to the literature of last mile agent, which is very important. But does it particularly has to be on foreign aid, or it doesn't matter? What if it's a national program and still can we see that problem? Because I thought that poverty score, when they are choosing these poor families, might be a range rather than one cutoff, and whether it has any problem when you do this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll answer your second question because the first you can see in my paper, and I can share that with you in the appendix about the discontinuous jump. And I think that, yes, I can justify the fuzzy RDD design using that. Absolutely, I think foreign aid adds to this story because the mechanism that is working here is one of program quality. So people they have a high stake in this program because they know that it's going to bring them this benefit. Previous national programs have not had the same effect because they had less credibility, but I would just leave it at there is more work that needs to be done to see the differential effect between programs that are not funded by aid and programs that are. And that's hopefully coming up later in my research agenda. But thank you so much for pointing this out.
Thank you. So just I'm taking a very quick couple of questions from the chat box because chat box has become very vibrant now. So Nicholas Peters from ZIZ, she asked the question that what are the lessons learned from a donor organization? How can a donor organization be more inclusive and include more ineligible households? So that is the question. So if you can very quickly, ShahBano, answer that, and then there is a very another small question for you too.
donor organizations, I think rethinking the inclusion of politics is very important, and being sensitive to the fact that political leaders in these societies are often also community leaders, and that they have a role to play in figuring out how the aid gets to the final consumer, I think, or final beneficiary. I think that's super important. And I'll take the next question, please.
Thank you. So the next question is from Fatima. Is there an actual change in behavior of counselors, or is it just the perception that they are working better or more approachable?
I did one perception test, which is, do counselors only give this to people who vote for them? And I find that voters do not perceive that is the case. They perceive counselors as being responsive. I've done a lot of qualitative work to see whether counselors are responding in a way to provide these services. And yes, I do find that they are. It is not about being better. It is just that they see this kind of constituency service as their main domain in countries like in South Asia, where constituency service and person-to-person contact becomes really important. I'll stop here in the interest of time. Once again, thank you so much, and I really, really wish I was there in person, but hopefully can be there in person next time.
Yeah, thank you, Shahban. We also missed you. And wish you see you sometime in the next event. So thank you. Then we now move to our third presentation, the final presentation of this session. Zaeem-Al Ehsan. He's going to present on Bangladesh. Something on Bangladesh, yes, using nightlights. There are many discussions actually happening on the chat box. We may not be able to take them all, but I'm really glad that people or the participants, they're exchanging their views. They're sharing their views. Thank you.
So I'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to everyone who's joining online. I would also like to thank SANEM and the World Bank for organizing this as well. I am Zaeem. I'm currently a research associate at the World Bank's Poverty and Equity team based in Bangladesh. So the paper I'll be presenting today is actually my master's thesis that I finished last year in East West University in Bangladesh under the supervision of Professor Salim and Basher. So this is the overall structure of my presentation, but I'll mostly be focusing on the methodology and the theoretical framework, since that's the most important part of this paper actually. As researchers in South Asia, and especially in Bangladesh, we've all encountered issues in getting access to timely data. While macroeconomic data at the country level is available, when we want to get access to timely disaggregated data at the district level, we do often encounter issues in finding them. And there's also an issue of GDP being not a very holistic measure of the entire economy in developing countries, since a large part of it happens in the informal sector. And even when we do have access to those data, its reliability is also questioned, since the administrative bodies in developing countries aren't usually the best equipped to produce good and robust estimates of national income statistics. So we see there's a gap between the need and the availability of reliable, timely, accurate, disaggregated data. And nightlights has been proved to be a good proxy measure of income. So researchers have asserted that we can use nightlights to fill in the void. I would like to say that we are not saying that it's a substitute for national income statistics. We're just saying it's a good proxy when the actual one is not available. So we know by now that we can use nightlights to estimate GDP even at the country level and at the subnational level. But for this paper, we want to see whether we can use nightlights to predict the annual district-level GDP for Bangladesh for all the 64 districts, ranging from 1992 to 2020. So we use nightlight intensity to estimate service and industry GDP, and to estimate agricultural GDP, use the percentage share of rural population. And we find that this leads to good results. Our prediction error is 22.24%, and the correlation is quite well as well. So it's 0.814 with the actual GDP. So Henderson is one of the seminal papers that one of the first papers that worked on establishing a relationship between nightlight growth and income growth. So they use the growth in nightlight intensity as a measure of income growth, and they established that nightlight intensity can be used as an accurate way of assessing economic activity even at the subnational level. Economists from the World Bank, such as Barun Deb Pal and Bayer, extend the methodology of Henderson to the context of both Africa and South Asia, and they also predict district-level GDP. They also find good estimates of predicted GDP, which correlate quite well with the actual one. So Baer finds that the predicted GDP correlates 0.85 at the state, 0.85 at the state level and 0.83 at the district level. So we can think of nightlights to be a function of GDP, which makes economic sense. As the country gets richer, as they employ more technology, economic activity will inherently pervade into the night, and any economic activity happening in the night will emit some source of nightlights. So Henderson says that a simple constant elasticity relationship is appropriate enough to model this relationship, where beta is the elasticity which measures the changes to nightlights with respect to income. However, we can't ever observe Y, which is your true income. There will always be some sort of measurement error in income. So we always observe Z. So if we estimate equation 4, the slope estimate will be biased since there will be some sort of measurement error in the slope estimate. However, we are interested in estimating GDP using nightlights, and Henderson, Baer, Bundervoort, they find that nightlights can be a good predictor of measured GDP. And so if we estimate equation 5, we do find good fitted values of Z. So, and the slope estimate here is what we will be referring to as the inverse Henderson elasticity, which is the inverse relationship between nightlights and GDP. So to estimate this inverse Henderson elasticity, we do digress from existing literature by some bit. So we initially regress measured GDP on nightlight intensity, not the other way around. So our rationale builds on the fact that it is GDP that drives nightlight, not the other way around. And we invert the slope estimate to coincide with the methodology of Baer and Bundervoort. By doing this, we are assuming a strict one-to-one relationship between nightlights and GDP, and this also introduces a source of bias. One source of bias will be the measurement error in measured GDP, and the other source of bias will be assuming a strict one-to-one relationship, which might not actually be the case. So to estimate district-level GDP for Bangladesh, we start off with the actual Bangladesh GDP for 1992 to 2020, and we disaggregate that into its sectoral components using national income statistics. And the second addition we make to existing literature is we assume that it is the enterprises that are actually adding direct value to GDP. Electricity consumption by consumers are not directly adding value to GDP. And to estimate the sectoral elasticities, we are regressing the sectoral value added on the enterprise nightlight elasticity, so equations 6 to 7. And we are inverting the slope estimates from equations 7 and 8, which is the, when we invert it, it's what we're calling as the inverse Henderson elasticity, the impact of changes in nightlight to that of GDP. So we invert the slope elasticities to arrive at the inverse Henderson elasticity. Then we make a distinction that not all nightlights will actually be productive. There will be some sort of wastage. So we are scaling up the enterprise nightlight to arrive at productive industrial and productive service sector nightlight intensity. So now we're at the stage where we can actually estimate the GDP. So we're estimating service and industrial GDP by weighting the percentage emitted by that particular district as a share of the entire country. And to estimate for the district level agricultural GDP, we're using the percentage of rural population for that particular district at that particular year to apportion to the district level. And we add these three estimates to arrive at the total GDP. So these are actual main differences from existing literature. I'll come back to this if there's any question. And these are the sources of data. We're using a harmonized data set of nightlights that is produced by Lee. And we're using value added from the World Bank and the rural population we're getting from our statistics board. So now we're at the results. So here I present the regressions that I run. I'm regressing the sectoral value added on the enterprise nightlight intensity. Columns 1, 2, and 3 do not include a time trend variable. Columns 4, 5, 6 do include a time trend variable. And we do see that service sector GDP has a higher impact on nightlight intensity, which I guess makes sense. What came as a shock to us is that if you look at columns 1 and 4, we are seeing that agricultural GDP has a statistically significant impact on nightlights, which is in stark contradiction to all the literature that we've gone over. So we wanted to know how we could navigate through this. So Bunderwort and Baer finds that there's a statistically insignificant impact of agricultural GDP on nightlights in South Asia. Even Keola paper finds that luminosity data might not be an accurate predictor of agricultural GDP in South Asia, since they find that agricultural GDP can increase or decrease without any changes in nightlight. So we, and even though it's an older paper, Dole and Pachuri find that close to half of the rural population of South Asia lack access to electricity. And even when they do have access to electricity, farmers use electricity for pumping water, etc., which actually do not contribute to nightlights. So even though we do find a statistically significant relationship between nightlights and agricultural GDP, we do adhere to existing literature, and we do highlight how this is a limitation of our study and we can address it going forward. So here I plot the prediction error of our estimates. One thing I would like to bring to your attention is that we have actual district level GDP for Bangladesh only from 1996 through 2000. So we are comparing our predictions for that year to that of the actual GDP we have. Another caveat is that I'm showing Baer's prediction errors, which are at the country level. Our prediction error is at the district level. So our estimates are the lowest column in the graph. So we find that our prediction error is approximately 22%. So we break it down by district level just to see whether there's any relationship, whether there's any correlation as to where the district is located and whether the prediction error sort of explains that. So we don't inherently see any such of a relationship, but we do see that 5 districts are actually driving up our prediction error. And if we exclude those 5 districts, our prediction error falls to about 15%. So here I plot the actual GDP against the predicted GDP, and we do see that 5 districts are actually way up in the plot, and our prediction and the correlation is 0.814, which is statistically significant at the 1% level of significance. Here I show the summary statistics of her predictions, and so one thing that Henderson says that the predicted GDPs will exhibit lower standard deviation than actual GDP, which is sort of a better contribution of using nightlights for proxying national income statistics. So we do find that. So these are some of the other interesting analysis we do in the paper that I'm not listing here. So we do address the eastern and western divide. So there's been debate about the growth of eastern and western districts and how they differ in development. And we do a stationarity test on our predicted estimates as well. Some robustness checks as usual. And I'd like to end here by thanking everyone for coming in, and I'll take any questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Zain. Questions. So first Ahmed and then Akurshik.
Yeah, so my question is quite about the intuition behind using nightlight, because nightlight is, based on my information, is satellite data from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m., right? I wonder what kind of economic activities could happen during that time at night, so that nightlight could capture. And then a suggestion about agriculture sector, could you use vegetation as a measure of GDP for that sector? Thank you.
Right, so to address your second question, using vegetation data is actually a good proxy for estimating agricultural GDP, and that is something we want to look forward, and we want to estimate that. And the question about when the satellite roams around, so it's in the nighttime from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So it's only in the night. So they take pictures around the world and they upload it, and the satellite intercalibrates it, cleans the data and whatnot. So it's during the nighttime.
Akurshik.
Hi. So my question is about the measurement error in the nightlights. So have you checked for like weather and things like that? Maybe there like things when there were clouds, so there was a more measurement error. And I think other studies have talked about nightlights and GDP being negatively correlated in certain rural areas. So when you look at the district based on rural urban split, do you see more error in districts that are rural versus urban?
Right. So that's something we should look at. We did not do a disaggregated analysis as to whether a certain district which is urban has a higher or lower prediction error. So we do, in our paper, we do try to see whether the percentage. So one limitation is that we only have actual district level GDP from 1996 to 2000. And since then, a lot of districts have either moved out of agriculture, and there has been a lot of changes in the composition of the districts. So that is something we can look at. So in the paper, we see whether between 1996 and 2000, whether the sectoral composition has any effect on the measurement error. And we do see that the sectoral composition does not have a significant impact on your error.
Okay. Any question? Yes, please. Can you kindly introduce yourself very briefly? And okay, first there and then I'll come to you. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Ankit. I'm a PhD candidate at Johns Hopkins Science. So thank you so much for the presentation. So my question is, like you rightly mentioned that, electrification is a big concern because it does bring the endogeneity concerns, right? So I'm just trying to understand, in your estimation, how do you control for that endogeneity concern? Because especially in the rural areas which are not lit that well, as the GDP grows, the electrification programs also come in, and that do tend to affect your nightlights estimates, right? That is part one. Like, are you explicitly controlling for those variations? And second, like, can you briefly say about like what kind of standard errors are you using? Because there are also potential spatial correlations going on here. Thank you so much.
All right, so to address the first question about the electrification, so we were not able to get disaggregated electrification data for each district. So that's something we are looking into currently, and we want to address the ingenuity issue as well. So we, even in Henderson and Henderson paper and the Bear paper, they do highlight how there is an inherent ingenuity issue in the model. And so our main goal of this paper was to see whether we can fill in the gap that is currently in Bangladesh. There is significant scope to improve the model and make it more robust. But our main goal for this paper, at least, was to see whether we can extend the existing model that has been used in other countries and other districts to see whether it's applicable for Bangladesh as well. But improving the model, that is the second step we are hoping to address. And to address the standard error question, we do use robust standard errors.
Yes. Hi, Maurizio Busolo from the World Bank. South Asia Chief Economist Office. So my question is fairly basic. You have as a dependent variable the nightlight, right? The full nightlight, because you can't distinguish light from agriculture, light from unless is specific to a location, right? So if that's the case, what do you learn from the different elasticities that you get? So you get a higher elasticity for services, if I remember correctly. So it means that activities in services that use just more light, or something else, like when a country changes its production towards more services, you see more light, or what is the logic behind that?
Right, we do find that the service sector has a higher elasticity with respect to nightlights. We were not very much into looking at how close our elasticities are actually aligning with existing literature or how different they are from existing literature. But we do see that it is consistent with how Bear and Bunderwood has found in India and Africa as well. So like I mentioned before, the main goal was to see whether we can actually fill in the void that is currently in Bangladesh, to see whether we can actually get close to good proxy measures of your district GDP data for Bangladesh. But we were not very much into understanding how the different sectors are contributing to nightlights. There's a lot of scope to improve the model. We do want to address the border issues as well, since border districts should exhibit more nightlights, but that's not actually contributing to GDP as well. And like we got a question before, there should be differences between urban and rural areas as well. And Bangladesh, there are manufacturing clusters as well. So if we had more data, so since we have district GDP data only for 1996 to 2000, we could not do a regression at the district level. So the regression we did is only at the country level. So if we have more up to date and more a higher number of data at the district level, we can introduce more dummy variables and make the model better and richer and get a better elasticity that is more relevant for each district?
I have 4 minutes for, yeah. So in that case, what I'll do, just to the justice to the online participants, because they post some questions or comments, let me read out, because we may not be able to get the response, but let me read out some of those comments or questions. I think one question was by Karmul Bari. He asked, I think, on this nightlight paper, that have you considered how long, how long the lights remained present, and behavior of nighttime transactions and the amount of time businesses remained open are likely to be affected. I think some of that have been also already been answered, so you don't really need to answer. Fatima also asked, did you include satellite fixed effects, as the same satellite is not collecting this information for the entire time period? And then there was another point was that did you include satellite? Oh, okay, the same question, I think. What economic activities could occur at that time of night? Meher Marin from New York. And then there should have been some segregation of the sectors across the rural and urban area while measuring the nightlight intensity as the dependent variable. And then final question was that how can you improve of your data related to neighboring data and its analyst with nightlight data, something like that. Anyway, so I think there was another question or comment for the first paper, but we, as I said, we may not have the time to respond. By Dr. Nahid Sattar, he said that production subsidy worked better in case of helping production. However, in Bangladesh, let me see. Yeah. However, in the case of low-income consumers, cash transfer or other social protection measures may be essential. So it was his comment. And then, yeah, I think, so these are the comments. And there was another comment by another assistant professor from Bangladesh, but I think that was really more Hans' presentation. It was on the building the resilience in Bangladesh, and especially how can investment in the private sector contribute to economic recovery and resilience. And then there was another question on the artificial intelligence. And so I think these are all. And I thank all the online participants for very, very vibrant, very active participation in the chat box, commenting, and also posing questions. And also during the session, the participants here, and of course the presenters. So with this, I'd like to close this session because we have a next session on health sector challenge and development. We have 3 papers to be presented there. And over to you, our next chair, Margio, please.